So it's going to be our outlook for the week starting on the 6th of January 2020, or 6th of February even, 2023. So I'll start off by going over the levels that I'm looking at going into this week. So the main level, I won't go sort of over all of them, but I'll go over the main ones. So the main ones I'm looking at is this monthly resistance here. I think it could make sense to have it marked up from here. Um, but based on the reactions that I've been seeing, I prefer to have mine marked from here. But I could sort of, if you have your sort of range marked up from this level, from 2018, I think it makes sense as well. We've got this resistance here that you can see when we sort of go to the dailies that I'm watching. A weekly support here, and then I think that's it for the monthlies, other than this sort of support here that I'll be watching. Going down to the weeklies, you start to see the reaction to the monthly resistance that I mentioned before. We got the Q2 base coming from there. This weekly resistance, whereas obviously the top of our range. Other than that, on the weekly, I think that's pretty much it. When you go down to the dailies, you can start to see what I'm looking at properly now. So we've got obviously the reaction all the way through here that I'll be paying a lot of attention to if we do start to break down out of the range. Obviously the top end of our base here. I think as well, if we do break out, it'll be important to pay attention to this wick here. We can see this reacted to the exact same point as this level here. So if we were to break out and see something like that, I wouldn't be surprised to see pullbacks coming from that level, or at least sort of some hesitation as we broke out. So in terms of scenarios going into that's pretty much all the levels I'm looking at, to be honest. If we break out of the range, it'll be this level here that I'll be watching. And then we'll sort of be this day support resistance that comes from around May time. You can see reaction to all the way through here. So I'll be watching this level here, this, and then potentially if we do manage to get above that, it'll be the daily support resistance here. To the downside, it'll be the monthly support first here, and then it'll be this monthly resistance here that I mentioned before, then obviously followed by the weekly support. I think it's important to keep an eye on the bottom end of this range here, and selling without seeing any either daily closes or 4-hour structure below is kind of retarded in my opinion, because this level here is going to be sort of a prime level for higher time frame buys and sort of macro buys to be playing out. So I think a lot of people will be looking to take buys from this level here to try to get firstly up to here, then obviously break out and try and over a long period of time see how high they can push. And if this level fails here, the next level for the sort of macro buys will be the weekly support. But yeah, so basically either side of this range here, I want to be looking for either daily closes above or below, or 4-hour structure, sort of have confidence. If we break out and we're in a session where we don't have that, I won't be looking to trade. I think looking at scenarios, we've already seen the top end of this range here. So if we look at the range here, top end already has the potential to cause issues. We've seen price ranging pretty hard all up in here last week. I think, to be fair, we have the potential to do the same thing at the bottom end of the range. And we're starting to see that on the 4-hour. So basically I had this marked out going into this week and the previous week, I think, or as soon as we saw this reaction here. So we've already seen the reaction here. And then on the hourly as well, you can start to see we had issues when we started breaking down here. Then we start to form support back above it here. So I think, to be fair, I obviously don't want to see range. It's February. It would be nice to start seeing some moves. I wouldn't be too shocked if we start to see range within here, sort of similar to what we saw at the top end, before we either sort of start to break back up, then we're looking at the Q2 base support again, or start to break down with our daily closes and 4-hour structure. So other than that, I don't think the scenarios are too important. I think it's good to be aware of them, but I think it's more important to follow everything from a session to session perspective. Talking about that as well, within all these high time frame levels here, like these zones I've got marked up, I won't be trading within them. I think if you want to trade within them, it'll make more sense to be waiting for targets, because like within like the Q2 base, for example, we've already seen the sort of, it's got a high potential for inconsistency if you're trading within it, even if you have a set bias. So sort of I'd err on the side of caution trading within any of these. Personally, I won't be. I'll be waiting until prices sort of in these cleaner areas here. But that's sort of it in terms of what I'm looking at for scenarios. Going on to the fundamentals for the week. Some fairly light days until we get up to about Thursday. So what I'm looking at for Monday is we got sort of fairly light day stuff listed all the way throughout. We've got a speech about 8:40. This is a speech that usually there's no sort of set time limit or sort of minimum on this, but they usually last. The shortest is sort of 15 minutes. The longest is usually about 2.5 hours. So trading within sort of 2.5 hours after 8 or 20 to 9. You see any moves and stuff like that aren't explained. It could be coming from something like this. Tuesday, another fairly light day with another speech from a different MPC member. This is again is the same sort of time that you'd be looking at, sort of 15 minutes to roughly 2.5 hours. That's coming in at 9 a.m. So if you're trading sort of between 9 and half 11, it's worth sort of keeping that in the back of your mind. Wednesday is probably the lightest day out of all of them. We've literally got 2 data releases within the session. Thursday, starting to get a little bit more interesting. We have a slightly more impactful hearing about the monetary policy report. This isn't something that I paid attention to too much, so I don't know how impactful it will be. But when you look at the last four of these hearings, I think the shortest one was 1.5 hours. The longest one was like 2 hours, 35 minutes. So on average, over the last four, they last between sort of 1.5 to 2.5 hours. So trading sort of dead volume time after, after my session, because this is at like quite late in the session. You could start to see some sort of unexplained moves. Personally, I'm not sure if this will be something that will cause inconsistency leading into the session, but I don't think it should be putting you off trades, but it's just worth keeping in mind. Friday is the heaviest day out of all of them. We've got the GDP coming up, obviously with all this sort of stuff as well. Going over my data collection, I was looking at, obviously the stuff I'm about to talk at it could be a coincidence. Is it sort of strong enough evidence to be taking trades off? Probably not. But when you look at the last four GDP releases, this is the month-on-month 30-minute time frame for all these charts. You can see that basically, so we had our release here. Following the release, we had a pullback. Price bottomed out, and we saw big continuation to the upside in the following sort of hours. Here you can see this. So that was the 12th of October. This is the following one from the 11th of November last year. So we had the release here. Following the release, we had a pullback, and then we saw big continuation to the downside. Upside or downside sort of irrelevant here, but the fact is we're seeing pullbacks and continuation. Here we saw price sort of bottomed out the pullback on the release. And then we saw big continuation from sort of mid to high time frame sort of perspective, pushing up with, I don't know if you can see it here, but I've got scale written up. That's, what is that? I think that's like 40 pips. Yeah, so 40 pips is between there and there. So you can see sort of roughly how big that is. It's probably like a 200 pip move to the upside there. Following up, or probably bigger than that, following the release. Then here you can see we had the release. Following the release, we had a pullback. Price tapped into our previous structure. And then again, we saw big continuation to the down. So that's another probably 200 pip move there. Is this sort of enough to trade on? Probably not. You've got to keep in mind as well that when the releases come out, you're not trading the release, you're trading how the release fits into everything else going on from a sort of global standpoint. So would I have confidence trading something like this based on the evidence here? No, not at all. But it's just sort of something I found interesting when I was looking back over the most recent releases. So that's sort of what I'm looking at going into this week. Yeah, so it's my outlook. Any questions? Any discussion? You're muted, Ravi.
Sorry, bro. Yeah, that's similar sort of thing which I'm looking at, because like expecting maybe this week we might just see a little bit more range, and maybe closer towards the end of the week might see a little bit more sort of volume kick in, hopefully. Hopefully we'll get some good moves and sort of stuff. And so you're saying you won't trade, you will mainly look for those cleaner moves in between those sort of zones here, zone areas and stuff.
Yeah, so with these here, I think in the last week, I think a lot of people ended up taking losses in here. If they did or not, that's sort of irrelevant to me, because my plan is, because these are obviously zones where we see reaction here, like you can see all the bullshit we've seen within like the Q2 base here, all these levels, these are areas you'd sort of look for reaction from.
Yeah.
And based on my plan and what I was doing sort of last year, I decided it's better for me, at least at the minute, to not be trading within these, just because of the higher sort of potential for inconsistency within.
Yeah.
So I've no interest. If anyone is trading within them, I think, like I said, waiting for targets would be sensible. But even then, it's not for me personally.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. Hopefully we might see a little bit of a further push down and maybe start building some sort of higher supports from down there, because I've got like a little monthly level, a monthly resistance down there, like close to 156, sort of close to 156 level. So we haven't really gone that further down for a while now, but that's where we kind of started from the 16th of Jan is where we kind of started from there. So we might see that and maybe go back up and test the top of the range again, really. So we might just be playing around there.
I think that would be nice to see, to be fair. If we sort of tapped into this level here, it's our previous monthly resistance, then start to build from that level. That would be the ideal, in my opinion.
Yeah, that'd be kind of good. And we'll get some good moves out of that.
Yeah, for sure. It would be nice to see after fucking being sat in here for so long.
Yeah, it's just I'm finding selling is just a little bit too, it's not, I don't know, it's just not consistent for me, like selling it at the moment. Because it's just like I'm not finding the moves to be, either the move comes sort of like, it's not within the kind of the session. Like you might get two bullish candles, but then sells, it pushes down even further, and buys don't make any sort of sense. Like that's what we've had this week, where you've come to the 4 hour chart and you've got two bullish 4 hour candles, and you're like, okay, the buys make sense in my session, but it's not safe to kind of do the buys because the moves already happened, but then it pushes down anyway. So it's just, it ends up being sells for the whole session, but that's not what you kind of planned for. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more consistent moves, man. And selling sometimes into certain areas, you're just going to expect a little bit more of a rejection or something like that. So
Yeah, for
it'd be
sure.
interesting to kind of see what happens this week, man.
Yeah, man, I'm
So
sort of looking forward to seeing. Hopefully, with it being February as well, this is the sort of time that we usually start to see the bigger movements coming out. But we're not starting to see them yet. But hopefully, they're coming. So
no, that's good,
see what
man.
happens. Sweet. Stop the recording.
Solid, bro.
Sweet.